First of all, not real. Also, not real. Look inside the chamber, and it's not the same thing. You see that blue in there? That means it's meant for BBs. Obviously orange tip. The question is, how do you find the right spot for your finger so that you don't push or pull your gun when you're trying to shoot straight? And the simple answer is, you gotta find the spot on your finger where, and feel free to adjust it, because there's not necessarily any dogma or doctrine to find the right spot. Some say you use the tip of your finger, but depending on what you're using, like if you're using a concealed carry, which is a compromise of a lot of things, and you can't get really a solid grip on the gun, you're gonna need to find a compromise, and depending on how big or small your hand is, you might have to push your finger all the way through just to find the right spot to be able to press your trigger without moving it in one direction or another. That is the simplest answer. Now, the long drawn out answer is, we're gonna start from the end goal. And the end goal is obviously to shoot a target in front of you and be accurate. So in order to do that, just like when we go driving, when we're getting ready to go drive, we set our seat and our steering wheel and all the controls in an appropriate place where we can reach the steering wheel, sit up in as comfortable a position as possible without it being too upright and uncomfortable, and also still be able to reach the shifter, the steering wheel, and all the other controls you're gonna need so that you can go in the direction that you want. Or let's say that's the target ahead of you. You wouldn't wanna keep moving your seat back and forth, and you wouldn't be changing the position of your steering wheel if you have that option as you're driving. So in that same regard, you wanna set your position on your firing hand so that you have, I'm gonna switch here. I'm gonna use my left hand, which is not the hand I shoot with. I like to start with my thumb up and get it in there into the beaver tail so that I can get as high up on the beaver tail as possible. And then I want to take my pinky, ring, and middle finger, slam this middle finger up as high on the bottom of that trigger guard, and then squeeze from there. So it'll leave this space right here. You'll also notice that it leaves your trigger finger, your index finger, the pointer finger that you're gonna use to press the trigger with, it leaves it out here. And that ideally, you should be able to press into that trigger without moving the gun left or right. And depending on whatever pistol you have, you might have to adjust that. And if you have a smaller concealed carry firearm, you might not have a whole lot of space in here, which is a big compromise, because this space is where you're gonna get connection for your support hand into the frame of the gun so that you can hold on to the gun and get contact with it to keep it from moving around and flipping up and down. Moving this to my actual shooting hand, I'm gonna go ahead and set that up. Thumb as high as I can, get my middle finger as high up into the trigger guard as possible, get my two other fingers in there, and now get my trigger finger in there. Play around with where, relative to the size of your hand and the size of your gun, fits that best. And if that's where it lands, it may not feel the most intuitive, it may not feel the most comfortable per se, but it may be the best place that you can shoot given the compromises of whatever platform you're using. And if you're using something like a P365 and their standard package, which is like a super tiny frame, you might be making the compromise of, and in my case, my entire hand, just like this officially licensed version of the M&P 40. So in this case, the dimensions ideally should be about the same. This is pretty close, almost as close to my P365 as I can get it. So there's a lot more compromise. You'll see that there's a lot less space in here. There's even less space in the P365. But again, it depends on the size of your own hands. You might not have a whole lot. And in this case, you might have to get in a little bit more just to get the right amount of finger in there to not push or pull the gun left or right. Now, that's that step. We don't want to get too hung up on that step necessarily. The next step that you want to experiment with is, and I'm going to use this closer to full size example. Again, this is just a toy. This is a fake 2011. But in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the appropriate grip, and on this side, I'm gonna take my pointer, middle, ring, and pinky fingers, and I'm gonna clamp it down on my 3 fingers on the firing hand. And I'm gonna take this meaty part of my thumb and stick it in that space in here to get connection with the gun. And if this were a real gun, this might actually have some real effective texture. This is just kind of a rubbery grip, but that'll be in there and that should create connection with the gun. And then ultimately, we want to develop a grip that is consistent, durable, and repeatable so that it doesn't move, it stays about where we want it. And that grip, just like our position in the car seat when we're driving, should stay about the same so that we can continue along and not have to think too much about our position in the seat. And that's what you want to think about. What I remember starting out when I was just getting to understand developing accuracy and shooting and aiming was, it was like I was constantly fighting with my hand placement because I was trying to find where to set the target in my sights, whether it was iron sights or a red dot. In this particular case, I almost don't even think about that anymore. Just like you don't necessarily think about the fact that even though you sit on the far left edge or on the far right edge of a vehicle, depending on where you're driving your car, you don't think about the fact that you're actually off center in the car, but somehow you go straight. That's because you're not looking at the middle of the hood of the car and attempting to aim and drive a foot, aim and drive a foot, aim and drive a foot. It just all kind of comes together. Obviously, at the very beginning, when you develop this, it's gonna be a little weird and it's gonna take some time for you to develop that, but take the time to do that, get into a firing position, dry fire, and see how much influence you have on the gun. And find a position that's consistent, repeatable, durable, so you can basically steer your gun and steer your sights where you need them. You want to focus more on where you're going and not on the hood ornament or the hood or the dash in front of you. So you don't want to look at your sights necessarily. You want to establish a good enough grip where every single time you bring your gun out, it's going to land in the correct spot where your red dot is in the appropriate place or where the front and back of your iron sights line up, and then you can just bring that to your target.